What's up, everyone? This will be my final thoughts on the D4 beta. Overall, I found it to be a very, very fun game. The combat was smooth. The lore and story was very good. For party play, it was good. It did incentivize more party play, just given that XP bump that you got when you were within 3 screens of other party members. Also helps having a little bit better diversity when you're creating parties. Crossplay is good. I play with my brother who's on PlayStation, and that worked out really well. In general, I think there's a very solid foundation there, but there's a lot of optimization that can happen both before launch and after launch. The framework is definitely there, and we'll get into some of the things that can get changed or improved upon as the game progresses, either through season mechanics, post-season, patches, or things that can get done in the interim. To start off with, kind of more general things, just getting more skippable dialogue and scenes, just be helpful. Single clicking for mechanics, especially in dungeons, essentially getting rid of that kind of casting bar that's there every time you go pick up something or put something down. There doesn't need to be that casting bar. UI improvements, map overlay option to move the chat location so it's not always fixated in that bottom right hand corner. Having the ability to move it around to different locations, I think, just gives better user preference and options. Having an option so that the health and resource globes always show the number. Also, when you're coming to an altar that's already found on another character, once you go through that particular area and the map is uncovered, show the altar as already, clicked. It just makes it a lot easier when you're running through with a secondary character to just really reinforce that, yes, I've already found that altar. I don't have to re-click it again, because there's still a lot of altars out there to find. Allowing party members to use the portrait to teleport to other party members, or keep the TPs active in town when you do TP back to town and jump to another player. Either going with the D3 style or the D2 style, either is fine just the way it works now. You kind of, if you're off someplace else farming or whatever, you just lose that TP and you have to backtrack, and it's a pain in the ass. Also, I want that Diablo cursor, the chainmail glove cursor back instead of using the StarCraft cursor. Just personal preference, but having that as an option would be nice. Dungeons, here's some things that should primarily get done post launch, whether it's patches or things that can happen in the interim, just to kind of help with replayability. For starters, more layout variety, whether it's different ways that the tiles can get put together. Just only having the six variants in Act 1 or just in one act alone. In terms of replayability, it gets old fast. I wouldn't spend a lot of time farming dungeons, especially endgame, if there's only a specific number of layouts in each zone. Just get rid of kill all monsters in the dungeon mechanic. Either make it a percentage of monsters or don't have the mechanic at all. Don't have a boss at all. Don't have a mechanic at all. And just have more elite mobs in there that have a higher chance to drop better gear. It would incentivize players to farm those dungeons out because you have the higher drop chances. you have good experience from it being elite mobs. You know, a lot more elite mobs in there versus a regular dungeon. Just, adds a little bit of different style gameplay as well. Another thing, more variety in terms of boss fights and bosses in general. It seemed like there was only a handful of specific bosses in those dungeons. So having different boss mechanics, more bosses kind of in general for those fights, makes it a little bit more of an exciting gameplay. Also in these dungeons, having the mechanic be an incentive, not a requirement. So it would give the final boss monster better drop loot, higher item level drop loot, a chance to drop, better gear. Pick your poison. But having the mechanic be an incentive, not a requirement, I think just helps in general. Itemization. It seems like there's an imbalance between skill tree damage and gear damage, with the weight being heavily more towards gear versus skills. Now, because of this, my thought is, and I think it's been said, many times over, the skill tree itself should be a free respec at any time. The Paragon board, given what we know about it now, having a lot more passives to it, with attribute points, the glyphs and legendary tiles and things like that, should have some kind of cost to it, whether it's high gold, farming essences like you do with Diablo 2 from, endgame bosses, whatever. Just because the builds are going to be more defined by the gear you're using and the tiles you select on your Paragon board, the gear is going to have a lot of plus to skills for your skill tree. But once again, given the limited points you put into your skill tree itself, in terms of being capped at 5 hard points for your skill and only having a single point into each of the passive modifiers, there's more emphasis on gear than the skill tree itself. The other part is, in terms of is there going to be real crafting, like Diablo 2 style Horadric Cube kind of crafting, not, go to a vendor, select a button type of crafting, add these 5 resources in there, 5 things that you found out in the open world, click craft or combine or whatever, and you pop out a pair of crafted blood gloves or, caster amulets or something that you're able to, some mechanic in the game that allows you to craft a piece of gear that's not from a vendor, or to re-roll, affixes, like a full re-roll that's not at a vendor, but it also costs, other gear you find out there, like D2 with the magic items and chip gems. You would combine you put 3 chip gems in your cube, 1 magic item, click, button, and it would re-roll all of the affixes on that magic item. It was great for early game if you were a certain class that needed a better, looking for a particular affix. You could keep re-rolling it as long as you had the gems to, help out your leveling process. That gets back to magic items being lackluster, especially early game. You'll get some retooling. I highly recommend looking at the Diablo 2 system for magic commons and rares, where rares have the most number of affixes, but a lower ceiling to them. Magic items having the lowest number or a low number of affixes, but a higher ceiling on them. So they could actually potentially be endgame gear, with magic items. And then common items actually having some type of affix as well. That makes them good bases for rune words if and when those ever come into play. Common items were phenomenal rune words. Common bases were phenomenal for rune words, especially if they had particular affixes on them that you were looking for. The skill tree could also benefit from skill synergies, not just the passive modifiers. So if you're going down a particular skill set, whether it be fire, cold, or lightning, having something in there that allows the other fire skills to kind of synergize with each other to boost either the core skill, the ultimate skill, or something. I think also, the legendary powers, the legendary aspects, at least in the early game, it's hard to tell if they'll have a lot more oomph behind them or a lot more power behind them. Right now, some of those affixes, some of the legendary powers are extremely lackluster. They don't feel legendary. And in some cases, the legendary item found in the game had a lower roll than what the aspect was, which I didn't think was possible, but that'll be the case. And kind of, it's more of a question: if uniques are meant to be build defining, how so? Are you going to have uniques kind of in your leveling process once you get beyond Act 1 in terms of, start to do some build progression? And kind of your more general items like your blood fists in Diablo 2, where you had, high IAS and life. Or is it going to be more centered around particular skill sets, skill builds, things like that? In terms of character balance, it is hard to tell with the early game and how it's going to balance out as things progress through, beyond Act 1. No matter what build you do with the Necro, I did a bone build with Corpse Explosion. It was just stupid easy. Blood, I heard and saw, was even easier. You essentially didn't die. Corpse Explosion, I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, should have some type of resource cost to it. Doesn't have to be a high resource cost, but it should have some type of resource cost, because all it takes is for your minions to kill one thing, and then you just recast Decrepify with amp damage on it and spam Corpse Explosion, and everything dies with 0 effort. Sork was OP early. I don't know if that's going to kind of teeter off as you get through later into the game. The rogue felt really balanced between melee and ranged. It just kind of felt like a pretty solid character, and pretty well balanced overall. The barb was the barb. Slow as expected, especially early on. Heavily gear dependent. Some skills were useless in boss fights, had low DPS in boss fights. I'm hoping that the mastery mechanic will improve a lot of the gameplay and a lot of DPS. Unfortunately, we weren't able to test that mechanic because that quest chain was in the dry steppes. So it might be that the barb gets super OP in late game. It's just hard to tell, in the level 1 to 25, essentially in the prologue part of the game, how well it's going to play early, throughout. The druid, probably one of the most lackluster of them all, at least early on. Earth skills beyond boulder, garbage, complete trash. Boulder was good for a lot of the knockback, but it was completely useless. It did 0 damage. It did 0 knockback to any of the bosses. The storm skills were okay. A lot of long cooldowns. Hurricane was complete trash. It didn't do what the damage that it said it was going to do. Long cooldown. It's just no good. Tornado reminded me of the tornado in D2, which was nice. Wind shear and your basic skills in general. You need to generate resources a little bit quicker early on. Shape shifting felt like more the typical melee style, where just a little lackluster at the beginning, a lot more gear dependent. We'll kind of see how that works out once the spirit boons come into play. Once again, that was a mechanic that we weren't able to test because that was locked in the Skosgland region. And it's very difficult to say if with those spirit boons, they're going to significantly improve the druid builds as it progresses into the end game. The open world seemed like there was a couple, general bugs. Half the time I couldn't leave through the eastern gate at the top left-hand corner, top right-hand corner, top right-hand exit. Sorry. There was randomly gaps that I couldn't jump over, even though that kind of jump traverse mechanic was there. It would just be like, nope. Then once you going back to the early prologue, once you complete Nevesk and have to find the cabin, the Nevesk waypoint should become available. Backtracking just to get it is annoying. It doesn't serve any major purpose. I don't care if there's a mount or not. When you complete that part of the story, that waypoint should become available. Have the waypoint kind of quest part, kick in right there. Click the waypoint. This is a waypoint. Click them all. They're great. But having to backtrack just for that one waypoint is a pain in the ass. I love the open world events. Keep those coming. Get more variability in there. In terms of mechanics, that can be done, as a lead up to launch and post launch. But having the open world events were really good. The mechanics were very repetitive, and just getting variability in there. A lot more repeatability or replayability. Side quests gets back into some of the open world things when you're trying to do a certain, slay a mob for essence or whatever. You be trying to slay a monster, someone else be trying to slay a monster. They kill the monster and get the essence. You get nothing. And then there's no essences and you're standing around for a couple minutes waiting for monsters to respawn. It's annoying. It's an MMO feature. It's an MMO thing, but it's annoying. The world boss, I only got to do once. Overall, it felt like a good fight, but it could use more mechanics. I'd also have, suggest having a minimum level to fight it. And then having, a max number of respawns per player, excluding resurrections. It would make the boss fight that world boss fight more challenging. It would incentivize you not to go in there with a level 5 character or level 10 character. And when I say excluding resurrections, by resurrecting another player, it takes time away from fighting the boss. And it means that other players risking getting, killed themselves by respawning you, by resurrecting you, instead of just, respawn at checkpoint and, back in you go. So, whether that's, 5 respawns per player or whatever before you get, kicked from the group and then allow someone else to come in. Just some thoughts. Overall, beta, fun time. I got every character up to level 25. Really enjoyed it. Really looking forward to the launch of the game. But like I said, there's only so much you can gain from an early beta. They did mention that this was a earlier version than what's currently being built right now. So we'll see what improvements have been done. They did launch some of them, one being the number of mechanics from finding the 2 keys or 2 boxes down to 1. That's an improvement. Not having the mechanic at all would be even better, or having the mechanic be a incentive instead of a need to do. Just good things. So anyways, we're going on 20 minutes. If you like the video, awesome. Hit the like button. Otherwise, I'll see you in hell.